Hello everyone, welcome to another stream. I'm hatting today because I hit my hair, so if I end up like this, tell me off. If I end up being like this, I'll try and keep it a little bit more. Maybe I should just lift it up a bit. There we go. Okay. Oh, my eyebrow weird there as well. Posture check. Why does that look like my eyebrows being pulled up by the hat? You see that? There we go. See that? See how that was getting pulled up there? I redeem posture check to make sure we can see you. Okay. Anyway, today we are here first for stream. We're going to do another Peralta's takes. You guys seem to enjoy the first one. 1 second, my mic looks a little dodgy on the, there we go. Okay. And today's question is, I'm going to turn this volume down a little bit. Today's question is, how long should a game be? Now, I think we can all start by saying, how long is a piece of string? And also, it depends. I think it's always going to come back to that with pretty much anything we talk about here, but I still think it's worth talking about. Tater, congrats on first. Lily, congrats on second. And welcome in, guys. So I think this is like, it's going to be a contentious point, and I think there's a few things to kind of go over from my side. What I will say first is Nate is saying as long as humanly possible, but minimum like 40 hours. So I think it's a hard one. It's even more of a hard one for me than it was the last one we did when we talked about story versus gameplay. And the reason for that is it depends. It really does depend, right? Genre is an important part with the length of the game. Story, of course, is an important part. DLC, does DLC get included in that? You know, there's so many parts. We've just had like 3 big parts said in chat, so I'll read those out now. Tater, depends on the type of game, but on average, I think a game can be as long as it keeps me engaged. Hollow Knight is a perfectly long game because you can take your own pace, but some games are long but empty because of collectibles. Right, so this is definitely something that I want to touch on. A lot of the questions that were dropped in the Discord, in the Peralta's Takes channel, were talking about, like, how long should a game be? Does a game deserve a sequel? And all that type of stuff. And, like, I think I obviously didn't be the sequel comment can be left for another time, but, like, a lot of it was, like, how big's too big of a game? And, how, like, I think that's related to the time question. So we'll definitely get into that. I don't think you should be able to finish a story in one sitting. I think it depends on it, doesn't it? What do you class as a sitting? So are you saying like 2 hours? Are you saying 2 hours, something like that? Story heavy, a solid 20 hours. Gameplay heavy can be eternal. I don't mind. For instance, driving games, I don't need an end. For story, I like a good wrap up. These games should be a 1 or 2 hour max. What's that in relation to? Right, so hello all. Hi Finn. Welcome in for Peralta's Takes number 2. So I'm going to give you guys some of my thoughts. Once upon a time, I would have sort of said what Nate initiated this conversation with as feasibly long as possible. Because once upon a time, I felt that was very much how I wanted my games to be. I want more and more and more and more and more. I think that's because I started in MMOs. Like, not started in MMOs, I definitely played a lot of games before that, but I think for me, my biggest gaming experiences were MMOs. And obviously an MMO is essentially endless, right? Most MMOs, as long as, I mean, WoW, for example, if you could have played WoW from day one and probably racked up thousands upon thousands of hours, right? MMOs have stories? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. So, in that way, I think my answer would have been a number of years ago. that I don't necessarily agree with now. And there's one example that actually changed that for me, and we will get there. I'm just going to read a little bit more chat, and then we'll jump back into it. So, well, there's a very famous game that I love dearly that would be a very vital for our talks about game completion. Finn says Yakuza, can I time him out? Joking, Finn. Maybe. So, my example was Witcher 3. Now, this is a game that I genuinely think is a hard one, is an important one for this debate, but is a hard one to decide. And the reason being, The Witcher on its own is about, well, if you want to do most of the game, you're talking a good 80 hours, right? And then on top of that, the DLC takes you about 130. I think when I played The Witcher, and I'm just going to check this now whilst we're live, Witcher 3. Oh, Witcher 3. So I played that back in 2020, and I put 121 hours in, and I didn't finish everything. So you're probably talking 130, 140. I feel replayability is more important than length. That is true. We're going to get to all of this, definitely. I came into Witcher 3. You did, Yorkie. Hello, welcome in. Already half-mast. I've read that just straight out. The reason I think Witcher 3 is a good example for this, both-wise, is that I fully believe The Witcher 3 deserves that runtime. But by the end of that runtime, I was haggard. I was like, get me to the end. I was like, get me to the end of this game. I love it. I think everything that's in the game is good. I think the DLC is great. But I do think that I personally tapped out on it after a while. Near the 100-hour mark. Like the last 20 hours, I was like, oh. Open world games are too long. That is definitely a part of this. I think, and the gaming industry went so close to open worlds all the time. Open world. And I think you can have open zones in games. I think a good example of this actually is when Pokemon tried out that open world area within the rest of the linear game. That sort of works. I think that would be a cooler concept for like the more modern era. People don't have loads of times to play games like that. Anyway, I'm going to have to go back up chat, so we're going to pause what I was saying for a second. We'll go back up. I was going to say the original Portal. It's a short 2-3 hour puzzle game with a really charming story with a really witty sense of humor. It's short and sweet, like eating a really jammy donut with cream on top. Finn, that is a very good point. There's definitely games that manage to really condense stuff in a perfect package, and they just do it really well. Some of that I can skip over because it's just you all being disgusting. I felt the same about Red Dead 2. Too damn long. I rushed through the last 20 hours of story. I can't test Red Dead 2 myself. I need to definitely play the Red Dead games at some point. But yeah, I sort of get that. See, Witcher 3 didn't give me that issue, but Act 3 of Ghost of Tsushima did that to me. Interesting. See, I didn't find Tsushima that bad. I definitely did find that I was being... By the end, I was being a little bit more... I was railroading myself a little bit more because I wanted to get to the end. So I mean, maybe you're right in a sense, but I didn't feel it as strong as I did with Witcher. It's actually a problem I have with Portal 2. It's a lot more bloated and kind of overstuffed with moments where story interrupts good puzzle. Again, it goes back to the point of, and again, let's keep on the idea of how long a story should be. So I'm going to say this and move on, but it really depends on genre, right? You know? I know that when an MMO expansion comes out, for example, I should put a week aside to get through that story. And typically, within that week, I should be up to the new max level, have done the new dungeons, have done the new story, and pretty much be in a comfortable position. In that same time, if I translated it to another game, I could have completed maybe 3 or 4 Halos in the same amount of time. Because Halo typically is about, for a campaign, is about 10 hours, 12 hours. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that you can really play a game. I mean, Mafia, for example, we're playing Mafia at the moment. I think we're about halfway through Mafia already. And we've only played for about 5 hours. So, you know. I think Skyrim's a bad example of an uninteresting short story, but long gameplay because of all the side stuff. Again, I can't test to Skyrim specifically, but I think those games thrive off that, right? Fallout is very similar. There's so much extra stuff. If you blitz the story, you'd be doing sort of in a day or two. But if you do all your side content, you try and immerse yourself in that world, it takes a lot longer all of a sudden. Funnily enough, if we talk 100% completion, I would say it's something I think Yakuza actually doesn't do well, in my opinion. What I want to go back to is, and I was actually thinking about this earlier. So, God of War Ragnarok. There is apparently a secret ending to the Valhalla DLC. And we are going to go and play that after this, and I am not doing it because you have to do another 4, 5, 6 runs of the Gauntlet of Valhalla to see it. I will be watching that on YouTube. I have no desire to do another to artificially expand my time in the game when I can see the cutscene on YouTube. And there's just a point where the game just becomes artificially, and like the same thing happened to, and I understand you get a boss fight out of it, but the same thing happens to me with in Arkham with the Riddler trophies. Yeah, I'll get a few if I see them. Yeah, I don't mind, but I don't want to go and spend another 20 hours trying to get them all. Do you know what I mean? You can watch all games on YouTube. Yes, of course you can, there. But what I'm talking about is generally experiencing a whole game is good, but then experiencing another 10 hours or whatever, it probably wouldn't be 10 hours, let's say 5, just to see an extra cutscene at the end is to me something that, like, I'm not going to waste my time on that, you know, in the nicest possible way. Right, let's go back up in the chat again. Because funny enough, if we talk 100% completion, I would say it's something I think Yakuza actually doesn't do well, in my opinion. Well, Finn, going over that, I mean, you saw me play Yakuza Kiwami, and there's a lot that I actually left out because I thought that the mini games. I think mini games can be so overbearing in game. Oh, Finn, thank you for the subscription. 26 months. Thanks, Finn. Really appreciate that. Look, ads. You're right. I skipped over a lot of the mini games, partly because some of them were a bit too randy for stream. Looking at you, that card game. And then the other side was just some of them were annoying and I just didn't have the interest. So it could depend on that too, definitely. I would argue 90% of Bethesda stuff fails in that bag. To be fair, the side quests and modding community is the backbone of those games. What's interesting is Detroit Become Human can be played through in maybe 10 hours depending on choices, but if you replay it for all 50 odd endings, then you can easily spend hundreds of hours on it. Well, that's the same sort of concept with Baldur's Gate, right? Sort of similar with certain other games as well. I mean, look at something like, this is an example that I've been thinking about as well, Star Wars The Old Republic. Now, really, that game, to be fully enjoyed and to fully understand the universe, especially of the base game, there's 8 stories to play through. There's 8 character classes to play through, and they all have their own story that actually links into each other. And as you play them, you realize that, oh, this is happening here because that happened there, and it plays back and forth with each other. So, not fully, but enough. And so that can be very time-consuming to play, 8 characters to max, to like, well, when it was max level 50, but thereafter, that's right, Ted. I had a valid criticism of Yakuza. I love that game so much. I actually haven't played Detroit. I've seen a lot of people play it. I do want to play it one time. Well, a few times, probably. Upon reflection, I actually don't hate Yakuza. I just find the fans insufferable. Wow. You can watch all games on YouTube. Yeah, I comment on that. Incredible game, one of the few where your choices actually matter. That's very true as well. Choices being linear ruins it sometimes when you know that there isn't really a change in the scenario. That's why I never bother with, hello, welcome in, by the way, Faustus. That's why I never bother with any of the special hardness unlocks in Halo. Like, yes, special cutscene woo. I like having fun, though. Exactly that. There's a level of, why is this game being artificially... I mean, this is an example. I mean, it's very different, and actually it doesn't really filter into this conversation because it's a game that continues forever, arguably, as well. But when a game adds dailies or some type of delayed, like MMOs again do this as well, where they add a delayed, like a cap that you can only play once per week, or something like that to get a certain amount of stuff, and you have to go in again. So artificially, and does that become too much? Do you know? Can sometimes that be too painful? Obviously not in every circumstance. Sometimes they just want you to play the game. Rivals, for example, I put 600 hours into. I don't want to talk about that, but still, you know, that's an online game, so obviously there's never going to be an end. See, I don't think that's wrong, because the Majima Everywhere system in Kiwami has charm, but gets really old eventually. Exactly. That's part of it. When you're rehashing the same stuff is when the issue really comes to be. I think someone, I forget who put it right at the start of when we were talking about this. Tater, actually. Tater said, as long as the game keeps me engaged. And I think that's very true. You know, we've played Ragnarok for about 60 hours, and I don't feel disengaged really until just now with Valhalla. I loved every other part of the game, really speaking. So you're right in that sense. I mean, those fights, some of those boss fights were so gripping, maybe in a negative way to a degree, but gripping that I couldn't leave them alone, right? So, yeah. I'd say Baldur's Gate is less so, but won't say more due to spoilers. Okay. So I think Baldur's Gate suffers from a great story, but bogged down resource management. Well, yeah. I like resource management, to be fair, but that's because it makes my... okay. More outfits. I don't know what that's in relation to. I've met dozens of fans. They're all insufferable. Okay. Where possible, I understand there's a conversation happening in chat as well, but where possible, if we could keep it a little bit more on the main topic, just so that it's easier to read for me and for the top of the video. Now there's no resources in BG2. The only thing you need is supplies for rests. I will say Peralta that you're never going to find a Yakuza fan who actually enjoys playing Mahjong, but the series, funnily enough, won't be the same without it. There's things like that in games. Those things happen. Just stop looting everything possible when he becomes irrelevant very quickly. You're talking to a resource goblin. Okay. I think once you've played it once, you realize that, yeah. Never even bother doing anything. I'm on clan fighting in Yakuza game because I don't play to 100% completion. That is something that's very important, actually. How much importance do you place on 100%ing, right? I think that's the most important, actually, part of this debate, because I focus primarily on, does it have story involved in it? If yes, I will try to complete it. Is it somewhat relevant to the game in terms of, is it a side boss that I can easily get to, or that is part of a quest in some degree? Yes, okay, I'll do it. Am I going to jump through 10 different hoops to face this extra side boss? No. Like, I played Final Fantasy 15 when that came to PC, and everyone's like, oh, there's like 10 side bosses in the game. I was like, okay, but how long is that going to take me? And are they really relevant to the story? And am I going to feel that much of a sense of accomplishment for beating them? If no to all those, not doing it. You know what I mean? Some people live their lives inside of a game, and that's fine, but I personally don't. I like to play a game, learn its story, learn its lore, move on. Some games overcompensate with engagement, though, by putting too much combat in it. It's always the ones where combat sucks. Greedfall suffers from this. I can see that, actually. I see that. I see what you mean with that. Yeah, I can see that. I did play Greedfall, actually, so I kind of get what you're saying. I didn't actually end up going anywhere near the sequel, though, because I know they were being really shitty to their staff, so anyway, that's a different topic. I took a break and did mostly evil playthrough, and then with this, Greedfall needed more in the rest of it. Also, maybe someone going over the shoulder going, hey, isn't the theme of this kind of weird and tone deaf? Well, yeah. I feel like 100% if there's no story involvement is a subject more on achievement hunting. It is, but we're talking about how long a game should be, and I think that comes into this, doesn't it? I personally will never achievement hunt. I'm not going to sit there and go, right, I didn't get these 3 achievements. This game, that's just not of interest to me at all. I'm not bothered with the... Oh, yeah, we went over that. Anyway, back to work, but with no combat, it's just a walking sim. I mean, don't get me wrong, not no combat. I think it depends on... Like, I was talking about this, I think, with Tater in passing the other day, and I don't play games to artificially enrage myself. And what I mean by that is, if a game gives me a list of options of what to play on, I know I'm about a normal level on average. So when that's the case, I don't then go, right, I'm going to give myself a challenge and go on hard, because I know I'll just get pissed off, and I know that I'm just artificially making the game longer for myself. If it's a game that's meant to be hard, like Dark Souls or Elden Ring or whatever, that's a different kettle of fish, because that is meant to be hard. You're going into that game knowing that. But if I'm sat there and I'm going to play, like the example that came to mind when we were talking about it before was that if I'm sat there and I'm playing Jedi Fallen Order, I'm not going to put it on Grandmaster. Like, that's for people who are trying to flex that they're really good, or are trying to do a challenge stream or whatever. In my head, I'm in Jedi Fallen Order for the story. Arguably, Jedi Fallen Order is a really nice, I was going to say nice tight, but I know some people are going to say be disgusting with that. A nice compact experience. Blowing out games with a bad combat because they don't know how to fill a gap quickly turns progression into a chore. We will comment on that, actually. I find that a lot of game developers, when they don't know how to make a boss harder, and this is sort of features into this slightly, but when they don't know how to make a boss harder, they make them heal to full, or they make them have so much health that it's just a slog. And I think that's relevant. I think that's slightly relevant to this conversation. I definitely wanted to add that from what Yorkie was saying there. How about a game like Sekiro, which has different endings with different final bosses and optional boss you need to do for other endings? I don't know about Sekiro, but I do know about Nier Automata, and I can give that as a sort of relevant other side, because you have to basically repeat some of the story to continue on this new path. And I don't love that as a concept. Nier got away with it because it was like Lion King 1.5, in the sense that it was following different characters within that, with each go. But I really didn't love that, because I don't really want to spend my time going over this. Do you know what it reminds me of? And I don't know how many people will agree with this. I generally hate flashback episodes in shows, because I feel like a whole episode that's a flashback means that you could have easily disseminated this flashback across the season. And sometimes it works, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every time, but you could have generally disseminated this information across the season, and you wouldn't have felt like you've not progressed the story at all because you've had to go back. Do you know what I mean? I think the one time I actually really liked the flashback episode was they did one in Jessica Jones season 3, and I really enjoyed that one because it wasn't about Jessica, it was about another character, and the way that they did that was relevant and actually did expand the plot a lot. But generally, I find a flashback episode is not great, and that's what I feel like if you kind of put me back, slide me back in a game to try and get some new content out of me there afterwards, if that makes sense. I'm just quickly scrolling through and just picking out here. I think the problem is what this is Faustus. I think the problem is that is what counts towards the length of a story is different per person. Like you and I like stories so extraneous stuff that doesn't add to it can feel tasking to us, but others who are only in for gameplay can find overlingering narratives to be annoying. Right, so what you're saying there, Faustus, is me and you, we might search for some little lore components that are relevant and interesting, but others might not enjoy that. And you're definitely true. You're definitely right. And again, I want to just circle back very quickly to what I said at the top of the video. What it is always going to come back to with any debate you have like this is it depends and how long is a piece of string. But we're trying to kind of get sort of the intellectual kind of grounds of like what matters in this conversation, I think, and what is generally seen as correct. And I think again, Tata hit it really well on the head at the beginning, that the main thing is engagement. If you're engaged for 5 minutes, great. If you're engaged for 10 minutes, great. You know, but you have to keep engaging people. If you get to 10 hours and your game should be done, because it's not going to engage people beyond that, 10 hours. If it's going to be, 20, if it's going to be 30, 40, 50, etc. Great. yeah, I think as long as you're engaging people, I think that has to be the main point. I feel like the Souls likes are a different kettle of fish because their whole selling point is game, it's challenging, pushing themselves. Exactly, Yorkie. Exactly. And I like that as a genre, actually, because I think when I get around to those games proper, I don't mind being challenged. I don't mind playing a challenging game, but I want to know that I'm going into it for the challenge. I don't want to artificially make, and again, I know that those options are in there for a reason, but I don't want to play a game that I'm generally going in for the story on a hard difficulty, and if I finish the game that I'm in there for the story, I don't want to then play it on a grandmaster difficulty or like an elite difficulty or whatever, because I've played it. I'm moving on. Thank you. My life isn't long enough for me to play a grandmaster Jedi Fallen Order. But what about musical episodes? That is a totally different debate, Lily. You know it. Flashback episodes are made when the writers need to fill an episode. That's how it feels sometimes with games. They reuse stuff to artificially expand it. Also, to be fair, I said MMO combat, just less bogged down combat. I don't always want to control 4 different characters. That's an interesting point. I think it can depend. I think it also depends on if you've got people with you. I think that can change how long a game can feasibly be. Because, I mean, Back 4 Blood, for example, right? We've probably put in what? I think I'd have been bored of that game by now if I wasn't playing with you guys. If I'm being completely honest, if I wasn't playing with Nate, Lily, and Tater. But playing with you guys, the engagement continues, right? So there's elements of like, is this, again, it goes back to genre as well. And then you got Elden Ring, which has 60 different endings. You need to beat the game 6 times to get them all. Well, that's the thing. I generally prefer not to. For example, I am doing Baldur's Gate with Gagita, Zindello, and Ash. I'm enjoying that. I am playing now as well. We've got a little side one where me and Gagita are playing one personally, off stream as well. And I'm excited to play both of those. I typically don't like going through games. So it's a hard one, especially because they want to make choices available. But I feel like, for me, I typically stick to the same choices anyway, or thereabouts. So I personally won't go that far because I don't think I should go that far. I don't want to sit there poring over every single dialogue option from every single NPC ever to the end of time. That's just not who I am as a person. I'd prefer to move on to a new game. Yeah, but you can watch a cutscene on YouTube, as Peralta said. I think that's what it fundamentally comes down to now. We live in an age where if you want to see how a cutscene goes differently, you can look it up. And I think that's okay. And I actually kind of argue that should be okay. Because people don't have time to play all these longer games and get all these different dialogue endings and stuff. A strong, intensive story that's 40 to 50 hours can work as long as you can engage with the player, make them think. Yeah, definitely. I think BG3 is a good 50, 60 hour game with content and potential to push it to 5,000, 6,000 hours. Yeah. One example of an open world with good stories and optional side stuff for me was Days Gone. I know not everyone liked it, but exploring to get this is Yorkie, by the way. But exploring to get resources to trade to keep your bike running and upgrade it, clearing the hordes to lessen the amount of groups of zombies. Like, it's all fun stuff and all entirely optional, and to me, it nailed the balance without making stuff bloated for the sake of pushing playtime. And that's the thing, right? That's what we're fundamentally talking about. If the game manages to engage you in what it's doing, then it's a win. That I think that's actually the answer to this. It's not. It's almost like not how long should a game be, but the question maybe should be reframed as how long can it? How long? How long do? Like I'm trying to think how to word this now, but it's basically like a game should be. Or your answer should be, a game should be as long as it is able to engage you. And I think that's the answer we keep coming back to here. We'll personally say to play the game once as good and once as evil because there's a lot more to BG3 than just the NPCs, and definitely play a run as the Dark Urge. Oh yeah. I'm not saying that, like, I'm just giving an example of what I'm currently facing. to better explain my points. But like, for example, the opposite side of this is, will I play God of War Ragnarok again anytime soon? No, probably not. And in fact, maybe never. And I think that's part of it as well, right? Is that some games just don't have that replayability, and some do, and that's okay. But I don't think I'd have the same energy for it on a second run through. Because you know the plot points, you know what's happening, you know, etc. I think with BG3 you should have the mindset Lily has of deciding what your character wants, treat it like D&D. Oh yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, Gigita and I were discussing this the other night. Gigita was playing their character, and they're like, this character is definitely more trusting than the one I have on my stream, and because of that, they found like they enjoyed Astarion a lot more in that. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to do it that way, and I think that's the best way to get that across. It's sort of similar to the Star Wars: The Old Republic. Again, the story doesn't change like crazy amounts, but a dark side and light side run is typically a good way of seeing the story pan out differently for each class, which means you technically have to do 16 if you want to see sort of everything, but yeah, which is a lot. So what I think we're all coming to here is essentially what I keep saying. Engagement is the priority. If you're not engaged with the game, then there's no point. And I actually quite like that answer. It's interesting that you can have some like it's like the end game of movies. End game of movies, that it is a movie. End game of games. In that if it's a 3-hour movie and it's good, you'll sit through it. If it's a 100-hour game and it's good, you'll sit through it. But also on the same token, you know, you can have a movie like I haven't watched it actually yet, but I know a lot of people are saying it's a perfect runtime. The Naked Gun that just came out, and it's a shorter film. It's about 90 minutes, I think, which is more in line with what films sort of used to be. But it's a perfect length, and people enjoyed it at that length. So it's definitely the same thing with games. You know, you can have a 10-hour game that's incredibly good. It could even really change your mindset on something. It could sit with you for a while. I mean, Claire Obscure, for example, is probably my game of the year. And how long did we take on Claire Obscure? So Claire, I mean, and there was lots of optional stuff that we didn't do in Claire, but I spent 40 hours in Claire, and I felt like I was done with it. There's a lot of optional stuff in that game, but it doesn't force you into it, and it doesn't feel like you're losing loads and loads if you don't do it. But like, that game stuck with me for a while. So yeah. Dark Age specifically has more storage though, as it was the original story hook for the game before they allowed you to be your own character. Yeah, I have heard that. It's why I love Yakuza. These games have stories and hooks and characters that held me on, even when at times I felt like the pace was slower and should have moved along. If it's Eternals, you just won't sit through it at all. Okay. Well, I actually liked Eternals, Nate, so. Ace Attorney is a really good story set of games that I feel are around 20-30 hours. Yeah, I think it all comes back to the same premise of, can you keep your audience engaged? So I'm glad that we all I think we all pretty much agree on this one, right? It doesn't really matter about the length of the game. It's about the developer's ability to get it right, so to speak. You know, there's plenty of short games that are shit. There's plenty of long games that are shit. We need to do more podcasts where we discuss films because I fight you on Eternals. We could do that at some point. We could definitely do an episode on like discussing, you know. I think the main factor we've come down to it is momentum. Momentum's actually a really good word for it, Yoki. Yeah, a game can be as long as it wants, as long as it has a story to tell. But one that once that momentum slows, so does our attention. That's the key word, momentum. Yeah, 100%. Actually, that's a really good word for it, momentum. Because that's very true as well. You can get to a point in a game. It's the same as a book, right? If you don't want to turn the page, that book has failed. And obviously you get to an end of a chapter and sometimes you have to put the book down. But if you don't want to read, like if you don't want to read the next page, or you don't want to start the next episode, similarly, if you don't want to start the next segment of a game at some point, then the game's arguably failed. So That's how I would maybe close this out. 100%. I think that's where open world games fail for me. You do a side quest and you lose all momentum for the story. It does do that. I will agree. A lot of side quests in games. I think one example that actually does very well is Mass Effect 3, in that all the side quests are linked to forcing the main story to a point where you have the support of all these allies. And I think that's a much better way of doing it, because some games, when you're doing a fetch quest suddenly, after doing hours of like god-ending, world-ending events, it can cut that momentum. A story must hold on to its audience, must not insist upon itself. Classic Bioware used to be amazing for those elements. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Mass Effect 3 ending, not phenomenal. But the idea of kind of having these quests that link to your power, so to use an easy word, I don't want to discuss it too much because I know Finn is going to be playing them soon. But that links to how the ending kind of goes for, you know, everyone, is interesting. It's definitely interesting. I think that's a way of doing it, for sure. We do need to play Mass Effect again. Well, not again, but I need to play Mass Effect on stream at one point. I do think we're going to leave it there. I know about the endings of ME3. Yeah, but I don't want to discuss it too much. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I know nobody likes them. No, it's not about the ending specifically. It's about the getting to that ending, if that makes sense. And the fact that at one point you technically had to do multiplayer to do it. Not so much with the Legendary Edition now, but you had to do. You could like get it in certain ways, and one of the ways was multiplayer. Back in yon year. Yeah. So anyway, that is going to be the end of our second episode of Peralta's Takes. Thank you for everyone for participating. I just tipped my hat by accident, by the way. I was like, milady, sorry. We're going to leave it there. So that's the episode 2 of Peralta's Takes. Those watching on Twitch, keep tuned in. We're going to play I Hate It Here too, Faustus. We're going to play God of War, get that finished up, despite what I just said about God of War. And yeah, thank you for those watching on YouTube as well. We will be ending the video here, so see you guys shortly. Bye guys.